Greetings, adventurers. This is DM Kurt, and today's video is about player characters who get diseases. So, we're going to look at 3 different game systems and how they handle that. First one is First Edition Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. First of 3 editions we're going to talk about. So, the way they handle it in First Edition. Page 13 of your First Edition DM's Guide if you're playing along at home. So, with each game month, you may wish to check each character to determine whether or not he or she has contracted a disease or parasitic infection. Check each week if conditions are particularly favorable, such as very hot weather or hot moist weather, filthy crowded conditions, etc. So they give you a base 2 to 3% chance, 2% for disease, 3% for parasitic infection. They add modifiers to this, which are plus 1 to 10% or minus 2%. So, it can vary. And once you've rolled that magic number, which is very hard to do in decent conditions, you'll then roll a percentile dice to see what area of the body is infected, and the occurrence, a D8 to determine whether it's acute or chronic, and a severity, D8, of mild, severe, or terminal. And then we get some slight descriptions. It's not really very descriptive. It's slightly less than a page once you get past the chart of the descriptions of each thing. Let's say joint disorders of a chronic nature cause the loss of 1 point of dexterity with each severe attack, causing such loss on a permanent basis. So if it's both chronic and severe, you're kind of screwed. A point of dex, which not a good thing. But it's not a very detailed section, which is unusual for First Edition because Gary Gygax really liked getting into the thickness. Oh no, my COVID. Anyway, okay, so let's go with our second choice of game systems, 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, the current edition. So we have a little under a page. We have part of a page here and 1 column here. So for diseases, a disease that does more than infect a few party members is primarily a plot device. The rules help describe the effects of the disease and how it can be cured, but the specifics on how a disease works aren't bound by a common set of rules. Diseases can affect any creature, and a given illness might or might not pass from one race or kind of creature to another. Okay, they're describing these diseases as plot devices. A plague might only affect constructs or undead, which would be weird, or sweep through a halfling neighborhood but leave other races untouched. What matters is the story you want to tell. So they give 3 sample diseases here. They don't give any real penalties to how to make a disease. It's not a negative to dex if it's joints. It's not a negative to constitution if it's cardiac. They just give 3 examples. Cackle fever targets humanoids, although gnomes are strangely immune. While in the grips of this disease, victims succumb to fits of mad laughter, and while they're having their fits of mad laughter, that's when they're contagious. They're not contagious at any other point. That's a weird disease. We're looking at con saves with DCs of 10 to 13. Okay, you have a plot device here and sort of a weird thing to fit into your game. Sewer plague. Okay, this I can do with. Sewer plague is a term for a broad category of illnesses that incubate in sewers, refuse heaps, swamps, and are sometimes transmitted by creatures that dwell in those areas, such as rats and otyughs. When a humanoid is bitten by a creature that carries such filth, DC 11 con save, or become infected. Now, a DC 11 con save is a 50% chance to ignore this disease. 50%. And that's assuming you don't have saving throw proficiency or a high con, which could easily make that super easy to pass. It takes 1d4 days for the symptoms to manifest, and then you gain a level of exhaustion. At the end of each long rest, make a DC 11 con save. On a fail, you gain a level of exhaustion. On a successful save, your level of exhaustion decreases by 1 level. So +1, -1, +1, -1 on your exhaustion levels from 1. So you go from 1 to 0, or 1 to 2, and 2 to 1, or 2 to 3, back and forth. And if you ever hit a 0 level of exhaustion, you recover. Sounds pretty easy. Honestly, sounds pretty easy. Especially if you have any decent constitution bonuses. But, depending on your die rolls, that could mess you up. Sight rot. Okay, sight rot. If you drink water contaminated by sight rot, you must make a DC 15 con save. 15. A little more difficult. Or your vision starts to become blurry. The creature takes a -1 to attack rolls and ability checks that rely on sight. At the end of each long rest after the symptoms appear, the penalty worsens by 1, and when it reaches -5, you are blinded until your sight is restored by magic such as Lesser Restoration, which isn't hard to find, or Heal, a little harder to find. Sight rot can be cured by using a rare flower called eyebright, which grows in some swamps. Given an hour, someone with proficiency with an herbalism kit can turn the flower into 1 dose of ointment, and you're squared away. Okay. The -1 for each long rest, that's long rest is generally once a day. So when we're looking at 5 days you're blinded, that's tough. That puts you on a timer, and it gives you a very specific quest to go find something. Hopefully you're near a swamp. 5th edition is treating diseases as plot devices, and it is encouraging you to be creative in the type of disease you get. I just described 3 different diseases, and they're all basically plot lines. Okay, I can dig it. 2 totally different theories of design came into play when they were writing this stuff. So let's try something else. Let's try a third system. Let's go with Castles and Crusades. If you have Castles and Crusades, you have either bought a print-on-demand book, or you bought a PDF and you had your computer printer just churn out some paper for you. Like I did, because it's cheaper that way. If I remember right, the PDFs were dirt cheap. So, the dogs are getting their playtime in. Castles and Crusades has their own way of doing things. Now let's start with what they would call their mission statement. Now remember, 5th edition did disease as plot device, and 1st edition did disease as it's just a chance it happens, man, and too bad. This is life in the Middle Ages. You'll get sick. Disease is defined as any pathological disorder that strikes an organism that causes discomfort, pain, and reduction of motor skills, impairment, or death. In Castles and Crusades, disease does not include pathological conditions caused by social disorders or post-traumatic stress caused by events or circumstances. Okay, sounds like they really don't want to mess around with mental health topics. Okay, we're just talking about physical ailments here. They're making that quite clear. Here's something else that gets into the mindset of the writers. Disease should be used carefully, as involuntary afflictions to a character can greatly alter the way a player perceives their character. Being crippled by a bacterial infection is not something that drives one to heroic deeds, but it can greatly alter the way one perceives or imagines their fighter, druid, bard, etc. On the other hand, it can create unusually challenging circumstances for the innovative player. As always, of course, paladins and clerics can cure most ailments with a cure disease. So that's a little glimpse into the writers. However, some creatures, such as rats, have the ability to cause disease through a bite or scratch. No duh. So, the quickest and easiest way to use disease in the game is to allow the afflicted a constitution save. Base the challenge level on the monsters hit die or the level of the trap. Here's your mechanics, yada yada yada. Here's what dice. Okay. First, we would roll the disease severity. It goes from mild, severe, chronic, or terminal on a d10. Depending on which severity, we go to a different table, and they have 4 tables, 2 on each side of the sheet of paper here. First, we roll a d12, and that determines which bodily system is affected. Cardiac, circulatory, dermatologic, endocrine, gastrointestinal, joint, etc. And depending on which of the systems is affected and the severity, the duration. Okay, duration is in weeks. So we have a duration in weeks. It's going to be a few weeks. I'm seeing at worst 12 weeks for a terminal infection. Or some of them can be anywhere from 1 to 12 depending on where you are on any of these charts. Now there's 2 things that happens for their diseases. So your system, whether it's cardiac or muscular or whatever, determines which attributes you'll have a penalty of 1, maybe 2 points to. Ooh, up to 4 for terminal disease. Anyway, you have a couple of points penalty onto one of your attributes or more. You will also suffer damage, hit points worth of damage for these diseases. Now, what they do differently is you'll take a couple of points of damage, and that is taken off of your maximum hit points. And you will retain that damage to your maximum hit points until you get some serious curative magic. So these diseases will mess you up. The effects, the penalties onto your strength or whatever, those are temporary and they go away as soon as the disease goes away. What we have here is diseases that will lay a character low. They will harm you and make your character less effective, permanently less effective, until you go on a great quest to find serious healing magic. These are not to be used lightly. These are not simple plot devices for a fun time. This is the heroic struggle against overwhelming odds, and I would say kind of grim gaming right there. But you know what? If you're willing to play hardcore mode, you're awesome. Good for you. But that's how these 3 different, pardon my 3-ring binder trying to eat my fingers. So that's how 3 completely different games handle diseases in game as I stack them for presentation. Anyway, that's my little video on how disease is handled in 3 different game systems. DM Kurt, out.